Stephanie Hubka, thank you for joining Lessons from Learning Leaders. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much for bringing me in.
So I'm looking at the LinkedIn profile as we always do, and the LinkedIn doesn't tell the full story. So Stephanie, for those who don't know you, tell us your story.
All right. Well, first of all, you notice the look on my face. My LinkedIn tells no story because some of us don't update our LinkedIn very often. Thank you. This is a reminder I should go back and probably do that at some point in time. But my story in talent development, to be honest with you, probably starts when I was about 12 years old.
Wow.
Although it wasn't because I even knew what talent development was. It was really what got me to where I live now, which is I live in the Washington, D.C. area. And when I was 12, we took a field trip. And I recall looking around and thinking, I really eventually want to move there. And my goal at that point in time, and in fact, my goal until really after I graduated from college, was to get a degree in political science, move to DC, work on the Hill, do something. I wasn't really sure. And then eventually run for president and, of course, win and solve all the world's problems. That was really the goal.
So
Now,
small.
we
You
didn't.
you were thinking small as a child.
Honestly, I wish I'd thought bigger at the time. If I had, maybe I would have stumbled upon talent development a little earlier. What ended up happening is I did get that degree. I did move to Washington, and I ended up, you don't get a job on the Hill right away. So I ended up at a headhunter, basically. You take the typing test and all of that, and they give you some sort of a job somewhere. I had seen one that was advertised. It was, I recall, it was an administrative assistant role. It paid $50,000, which was huge money when you're 22, right? So I go in, I take the test, and I recall them saying, you really did very well on all of the typing tests and the word test. Well, yeah, I actually went to a techie school, so I know computers, if that's what we're saying. And I remember she said, do you really want to be an administrative assistant? And I said, honestly, no, I want to be president of the United States, but I also really want $50,000. And she laughed and she said, we have a job that we're trying to fill, and I think you'd like it better. It's going to be a little bit more challenging in certain ways, but it's not going to pay that kind of money. And I said, all right, I'm interested. I'll consider it. I ended up as the education coordinator at a nonprofit in Alexandria, Virginia. And 2 weeks into the role, which was very much a fundamental talent development role, I remember thinking, forget the presidency. I can't do anything but this. I love this. So we start there. I ended up spending quite a bit of my career in e-learning. A lot of my background is in just designing, developing, and even running LMSs. So absolutely love it. But about not quite 10 years ago, I realized that a lot of the work that I love to do doesn't fall within e-learning. But when you work for a traditional employer, a lot of the times they tell you this is what you're hired for, this is what you're going to do for us. And it occurred to me that if I wanted to have all of the fun, and fun for me are needs assessments and facilitation and, just really anything you might lump into talent development. If you want to have all the fun, you kind of have to make all the rules. And so I decided to go off on my own. So I think you'd loosely call me a talent development consultant at this point in time. And I have done an awful lot of really fun projects over the last decade or so. Primarily, I've done plenty of e-learning, but a lot of it has been in facilitation and storytelling. And now quite a bit of my work is on what I think we're going to talk more about today, which is the world of connection. So that's kind of
Right.
how I come to be here.
It's funny how many people I talk to who say, well, I wasn't looking for a role in talent
Yeah.
development, but it found me. And next thing I know, I fell in love with it. And that seems to
Yeah.
be same with that's my story too. I mean, I wasn't always in training, but
Yeah.
I always got so much joy out of it. Hey, can you go train the new group? Yes, I will.
Of
Love it.
course. It's that people to people kind of connection that you look to make. And I think there's a reason a lot of us accidentally find ourselves. And I know that's Cami Bean's term, the accidental instructional designer, but it's true for all of us, the facilitators among us, really anybody who touches something in the talent development process. a lot of us didn't expect we'd be here, but there's something about us, our personalities, the fact that we look around and see we really want to do more for the people we work with. It's the most human focused profession I think you can find. And I think it really does kind of call to a lot of people. And if you find it, if you stumble into it, if someone sees it in you, I think you end up being the luckiest among us.
So you have the certified professional and talent development
I do.
certification from ATD. I had that as well. Uh,
Yeah.
it was very intimidating just to get. I'll be honest. I'm like, okay, I've got to learn a lot, and I studied and studied and studied,
Oh,
and
yeah.
when I finally went in to take the test, I mean, it reminded me of when I was 16 going to take my driver's test, just frozen, like,
Oh my
okay.
gosh.
And sitting down to take this test, I'm at a university like 30 miles from here, taking this test, and then afterwards I'm like, okay, okay. A lot of people fail this. If you fail it, you're okay. Didn't fail it, got it.
Yep. Yep.
What was your motivation to get that, and how has it helped you? Would you recommend people do it?
Oh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is another kind of a fun story. Did not know you'd ask me about this. So glad you did. So I got my CPTD back when it was the CPLP. So this
Okay.
was 2011. This is before it was sort of redesigned and rebranded a bit. Um, the certification had been out there for about 5 years when I first decided I was interested. And I had also been out there for about 5 years, 5 years and 2 days specifically. And the reason I know that is because I had been paying attention to a couple of different things. So at this point in time, I'm committed to talent development. I know this is where I want to spend my career. But the concern that I have is, do I need a master's degree in order to pursue what I'm looking for? Would a certification be a better route? I eventually decide the certification is the right starting point for me. I wasn't sure if the master's would be worth the investment just based on where I was going and what was available at that time. We have much better options now. So yeah, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to apply for this. They say you need 5 years in the field. I had just about 5 years. So what I did is I got to 5 years and I waited to 5 years and 2 days in order to get it. And so I decided I'm going to take this test. Now we know you should spend a couple of months preparing. It's a good idea. I didn't know this because I didn't know anyone who had this credential. So this is early March. I sign up for a March 30th test. Sure, let's do this. 3 weeks is not what you'd call a lot of time to prepare. I wouldn't make this recommendation. But I did end up absolutely cramming for this for all of that time. I went in, I took it. I actually never hit the submit button on the test. I was so afraid I was gonna fail it. I figured I'd just let the system time me out and see how I did.
Wow.
And I
Okay.
actually I end that's like, I mean, this is the level of fear and overwhelm that I was experiencing when I was taking the test. I did end up passing it. This is back when we had a work product. I ended up, fortunately passing that as well. And so I've now had the credential for 15 years. And I gotta tell you, it is one of the best professional decisions that I've made for many reasons. I'll give you two of them. One of them is I do think it carries a pretty decent amount of weight in terms of sharing with potential employers, current employers, colleagues, what kind of information and knowledge and skill level you have. So, just by saying you have that certification means that you have a certain body of knowledge and skill that are really going to help you in any position that you have. But I would say that there's a second part to that that maybe doesn't get talked about quite as much, and that is the level of community that you can build when you have this certification. I have been able to network with people I might otherwise not have met. I have volunteered for ATD Certification Institute. I've met incredibly smart and passionate and just really driven people just by way of being able to be in the same room with them. And for a lot of people, you might think this is a solo journey, and once you get it, it's just a couple of letters after your name. I found that the community aspect of it has been probably second to none. And if you're thinking about getting it, if you're thinking about what it can do for you professionally, yeah, there's a lot it can do for you just in terms of helping you make sure that you know what you need to know in this field, but it's really that connection and building the kind of community that comes with that, that for me has really been the absolute best benefit.
I'm glad you talked about the fact that it teaches you so much. People think about
Yeah.
a test and they're thinking about, this is stuff you already learned. What I learned leading up to that test was incredible because
Oh, yeah.
I took the time and I bought the study guide and all that and downloaded everything. I've still got it over in this mess over here somewhere. It's a thick bunch of papers and I'm like
Oh,
every
yeah.
once in a while I'll go through it just to keep, because I don't know if you've ever heard, but there's this thing called Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve, and it applies
Oh,
even to
isn't there?
trainers.
It
So
happens to the best of us.
yeah, so, every once in a while, you go back through it and you review it, so, yeah, I took it, I appreciated that, and,
Oh, yeah.
so let me ask you this, tell me about you've been out on your own now for quite some time. I see this thing that you're training called Connect 4, Build Community and Connection Through Training. Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
So this is a session that I debuted not too long ago, actually. It was at ATD's International Conference in LA in May of 2026. The genesis of this, it actually comes on the heels of a kind of a different session that I did a while back. So back when, and I make it sound like it was forever ago. It was really only a couple of years ago when AI started to become the conversation. I was actually at an ATD conference. I think this one was in San Diego, if I'm not mistaken. And everybody's asking, is this coming for us? Is this coming for our jobs? And I remember thinking, no, it's probably not that big a deal. I'd never really used AI at that point in time. Well, surprise, it kind of is a big thing. I ended up doing a session on how to humanize AI generated content. And it was through building that session, through understanding some of the challenges that we're facing at work a little bit differently, just in terms of how disconnected we can be as teams, how siloed work can be. It started to get me thinking maybe our focus, which for so long has been on basic things, content development and sharing information with learners, engagement, even. It got me thinking, are we going far enough? And I started to sort of center on the word connection. Connection is really something that we're hardwired for. Humans have always lived and worked and learned socially together for as far back as we're able to understand human history. And it got me to that point where I thought, I wonder if there's more we should be doing in a space that promotes connection. And that got me thinking, well, I wonder if there's more we should be doing, not just during training itself, but before training and after training, and maybe even across all of the different learning experiences that we might be responsible for. So before, during, after, and across got me thinking about the concept of four. There are four things there. That ended up getting me thinking about the game Connect 4. And so Connect 4 became this metaphor for the different ways that we should be considering connection when we are designing, developing, and delivering training. So that's really how we came to have that session, and why a lot of the work I'm doing now is very much centered on connection itself.
Tell me about as a trainer, how are you how are you showing this in the classroom? It amazes me. I've been to the training magazine conference multiple times. You'll sit at a table with some folks, and sometimes, uh, I mean, sometimes you get to know them really well. You may be sitting in a certification, you sit with them for 3 days or something. Sometimes you'll sit there and you never get to know them.
Mhm.
Um, I remember, I remember sitting with a guy, and I'd been sitting with him for maybe 4 hours, and he turns to me and he looks at me and goes, we had not talked politics. We had just talked training. And
Yeah.
he looks at me and he says, Dwayne, anybody ever tell you that you're a lot like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec? And I fell out
Aw,
laughing
that's a
because
compliment, though.
I'm like, yeah, more than once. Usually when I'm in the Waffle House saying, bring me all the eggs and bacon you have in the
For
back.
sure. For sure.
But how are you in these trainings? Because if you're training connection, if you're training people how
Yeah.
to do connection, you have to be showing that in the classroom. So tell me some of the things that you're doing in there that help bring that out.
Yeah, and I'll start with the paradox in all of that because connection isn't necessarily something you can train on. You can't you can't really get people to connect just by saying, "I'd like you to connect now." That's not really something people do. I mean, it would be great if it worked that way, but it really doesn't work that way. So, when it comes to especially facilitation, there are really 2 different things that I like to do in any type of training. The first one is going to sound really basic, but it works. The second one is going to sound really scary because it is, but it works. So the first one is I love starting with some sort of a storytelling exercise, partially because storytelling is a comfort zone for me. I love to tell stories, I love to listen to stories. But the secret in there is that's actually true for everybody. Humans think in stories, we process in narratives. And what storytelling does, especially without parameters, the way I structure activities typically is to say, turn to a partner, trios are fine, and tell a story. Any story you want. Talk about your job, talk about something funny that happened to you on the way to this conference or this learning experience. Talk about your pet, talk about something that, makes you laugh from your childhood, whatever it is you want to do. The reason it works, there are a couple of reasons it works, but one of them is because people are pretty good at telling stories. Usually people have a favorite story they like to tell, so they're willing to pull that out and share it. The other is that it approaches and invites vulnerability without requiring it. And what I mean by that is storytelling sometimes feels like it can be vulnerable, but you get to choose. In this case, we're letting the learners know they can choose any type of story they want, meaning they can get as personal as they choose to, or they can keep it as high level as they want to. Whatever is comfortable for them is going to meet the need of the activity. What I find is that when people have even just a few minutes to tell a story, a connection typically forms. And sometimes you see it because you've got one person who has something they can't wait to share. Enthusiasm is contagious. You often see a lot of people laughing. You see people sharing a moment. That often will inspire the second storyteller to perhaps be a little bit more vulnerable than they were planning to be. Maybe the story they heard reminds them of a story that they'd like to share. All in all, this really creates an opportunity for people to define what connection is going to look like and feel like to them. So I'm not up there saying, connect, do it, please, I need you to. I'm letting them determine what that looks like.
It's
So
funny.
that's one strategy.
It's funny that you're saying it because I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, how meta can I get? Because I'm waiting to
Yeah.
tell a story about me training people to tell
Right?
a story.
That's the best part about storytelling. It
So
gets you thinking. Yeah.
I had to last training I did was on storytelling, and
Good.
it was in DC actually. So we were sharing some of the
Wow.
same terrain there,
I
and
love it. That's thrilling. Yeah.
I said, "I have a scar on this finger, I have a scar on this finger, I have a scar going up my leg, I have a scar from a burn on my leg, I have a scar on my chin. I'm willing to tell you how I got any of them, but you have to pick." And
Ooh,
so the whole room was like, "Burn scar," and I was like, "You just picked the grossest story, and I'm gonna give you
they did it.
all the details." And so then I gave them all the gross I mean, I'm telling them, um,
Yeah.
the gross stuff, like, I'll give you a little peek. I was like, "So then I pull down my sock and my skin is stuck to my sock and it pulls." Yeah,
Ooh.
exactly, and so they're all like,
Oh, like
"Whoa."
furious.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. They're like they and
See, now I want the story.
I use that later. I'm like, "Remember when I told you about the sock? How'd you feel?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah." I was like, "You can do this with everybody." But then after that, I said, now that I've told you my story in your small groups, everyone has to tell a story about a scar they have." And
Ooh.
then, I mean, you wanna talk about they were like, so anyway, then I was landing with a parachute and it drug here, and now I'm getting drug. I'm like, I'm hearing all these stories. I'm like, you could not be getting closer to one another, telling everybody about how you got a scar. Um,
Yeah,
and I love that exercise, but I think that is brilliant that you use stories to draw that connection because that here's the thing about it. I was in Wasilla, Alaska. I asked a group, "Why should we tell stories?" And this guy in the back said, "Because people buy with emotion and they justify with logic."
that's it.
And if you can get people to buy that connection, And that's kinda what
Yes.
you're doing. You're connecting through that emotion of the story, and that is brilliant.
And I'm not telling them to connect, which I think is also very important. When we tell adults to do anything, I think we're naturally going to meet some resistance, even if it's something like get to know the person next to you. A lot of us would love to do that. We're curious about each other. We want to know what brought us into the same space, especially if it feels random, like at a conference, for example. You chose the session for a reason. What's yours? But what I really like about the storytelling activity is that I am encouraging people to connect. I've never once said what my purpose is. All I've done is say, I'm going to give you some time to chat with the person next to you. To tell a story, any story doesn't really matter. But what happens in that moment is that the connection is formed, and then I can intro something after that. I turn things back over for an activity. Well, they're not strangers anymore. They already know about their time that their dog ate that thing and had to go to the emergency vet at 2 in the morning. Like, the barriers have been broken down. The silos are gone. These are two people who are going to be able to have a more productive conversation. They will likely be more vulnerable. They will likely be willing to go deeper, and they're not going to take as much time to do it as they would if they didn't have that chance to connect. Because you think about it, how often do you walk into a room and say hi to the person next to you? A lot of times we don't do that as much anymore because you sit down next to the person who's, in the chair next to you. Well, they're on their phone, or maybe they're already in a conversation, or, there's some sort of an artificial barrier that prevents you from doing what might otherwise come naturally. So this takes all of that off their shoulders. They get a chance to have a nice experience. They don't know that this is setting them up for something better, but it does.
So one of the things that I try to emphasize here, and I wonder, I make assumptions that this is neglected or not thought about enough, but how do you create the psychological safety in that room for somebody to share a story? Because when you say tell a story, when I say tell a story about how you got a scar, that
Yeah.
could be a personal story. How are you creating the psychological safety for this to work?
Yeah, and I think that really comes down to letting people pick any story that they want. So very similar to how you ask people to share a scar story, you could have 5 scars on your body, and one of them is a story you don't wanna talk about, but one of them is from, like a dirt bike accident when you were 4 or something, and I mean, it's something that you don't mind sharing. You get to pick what that is. You get to determine whether or not this is more than you wanna share or right at the level you're comfortable with. And that is giving people control over how they embrace psychological safety. I've given them an environment that says anything you want to do here is fine. And if I'm pushing in a way that is going to be too much for somebody, I mean they're going to react to that in a number of different ways. When I give them very few guidelines, tell a story is as basic as you can get. If they wanna be vulnerable, they can. If they don't have to. I'm not gonna know the difference. The person they're talking to isn't gonna know the difference. We're only getting the story. And what I've found, though, is that a lot of times, even people who will start with the basics, maybe they've got a really good, very personal scar story, but they don't feel comfortable sharing that. So they start with the first one. That does not mean that they're not gonna feel at least a bit more comfortable going deeper in an activity, sharing something that maybe isn't as personal as the scar story, but is a little bit more personal perhaps about work because they're talking to somebody who is a bit safer to them now, not a stranger anymore, somebody they've built some form of a connection with. We're not talking about lifelong friends quite yet. Who knows what happens after the training is over? But it does give them that opportunity to sit in that space and know these are people who are going through the same experience I am. They are they're not they didn't judge my story when I told it the first time, no matter what it was. I can safely share something with them now. But a big part of that is the ownership. People get to own what that experience looks like and engage in a way that's going to feel natural and genuine to them.
I love that you talked about control. It reminded me of something Sardie Glove taught me years ago in his master facilitator course. I've never forgotten this line. He says,
Yeah,
"Great facilitators give up control for contribution,"
they
and
do.
I love
They
that.
do.
And you're so right. You're giving them control. And what made me laugh while you were talking about that is because I thought, yeah, I didn't mention the big scar going down my leg because I knew this was a very conservative audience and they probably shouldn't hear a story about how drunk I was in the Navy when I got this. And I'm like,
Yes.
probably not gonna probably not gonna endear myself to them, so we'll leave that out. And that goes back to knowing
Of
your audience
course.
as well.
Of course.
Tell me more about this Connect Four. What have been the responses as you delivered this? We've got about 5 minutes left, but I want to make sure we
Oh, yeah.
cover all of it.
Yeah, the responses have been overwhelmingly positive. I guess I should start with that. What we're really doing, and I mean, this could be an entirely different conversation, but what I'm really looking at now is this question of whether or not engagement as we know it and define it is enough. Do we need to start looking at what connection itself looks like? Engagement is often experienced as, I want people to get to know each other. I want them to work together. So let's put a poll up on the screen, or let's do, like a quick, pair and share or something like that. I think we need to be looking a little deeper. I think when we're looking at genuine human connection, that's really the space where behavior change is going to start to happen. It's no longer going to be, well, that training was fun. It's going to be much more about this training changed something in me, and therefore I can change something that I'm doing on the job. So the conversations I've been having with people since that training, and as I am doing more and more of this work and sharing this training with others, that's really been the feedback. Are we doing enough? Do we need to stop looking at engagement as some form of an artificial boundary in itself and start thinking more about what it means to connect? Not really even just during a training, but before people get into that space, how are we preparing the space for our learners? How are we preparing them? Are we encouraging any form of connection before they join us if we can? What does that look like after? How are we contributing to their experience once they are back to work, hopefully using what they learned? And I think that bigger question too is across. Is there a way that we can start to create learning rituals or conversations that don't just connect to one single learning experience, but really start to tie all of our efforts together so that people feel as though they're connected not just one time and not just to perhaps one or two people, but to anybody who might be part of a training or a program or anything else that we might be delivering to them.
So if someone's listened to the podcast and thinking this is exactly what my team needs, I want to bring Stephanie in and have her work with us on this. How do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, best way to get in touch with me. My website is a good starting point. It is, I don't even know if I told you my company name. My company is Protos Learning. I am terrible at advertising.
We'll have to do
Protos
another
Learning.
episode on marketing.
Yeah, I would love to listen in on that. I cannot be your guest for that one. Um, protoslearning.com. LinkedIn is also a great place if you want to send me a note. You can find me if you just search for my name, Stephanie Hubka. You'll see the Protos Learning graphic on there somewhere, so you'll know you're in the right place. Those are probably the two best places where you can find me at this point.
Are you going to be training anywhere soon? Like I know there's ATD conferences all the time. Can someone come and find you at one of those?
Yeah, I'm at most of the ATD conferences. I am not speaking this year at Core 4, but I am going to be there. I was actually part of the advisory group that pulled the conference together. So I'm excited to go have conversations, sit back, listen, and not stress about public speaking, which, believe it or not, is one of the things that scares me the most in this world. But yeah, I tend to be at a lot of the major conferences. I do a lot of ATD chapter conferences this fall. I will be, I actually don't know if it's been quite announced yet. It will be soon. I will be keynoting at ATD Alabama's conference. We'll be talking about connection there. And if you are not from Alabama, you should consider going anyway. They are a fantastic group down there. Really, really interesting stuff coming from the work that they're doing. So you'll find me there.
Very good. Hopefully, I can get back to the Training Mag conference this year. Hopefully, I'll see
I'm
you there.
hoping to too. Yeah. Yeah, that's it's on the list. We'll see whether or not I'm speaking there, but I'm looking forward to being there no matter what.
One of these days, they'll accept my application to train.
That's what I submitted for the first time. So maybe I'm putting it out into the universe right now, but we'll see what they come back with. Either way, I think I'll be there.
I expect that I'll get an email that says, "Hey, we had you on the schedule, but we went ahead and went with Stephanie Hubka."
No, no, I have a feeling they'll say, "Wow, we heard your episode, and yeah, just because you put it out there, now we're gonna go ahead and publicly shame you over that." So
Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with us this morning. I wish you all the best success. And maybe next time I'm out in the DC area, I get out there occasionally. We can meet up and talk training in person.
I would love it. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for including me. I absolutely love the podcast and will be very excited and a little nervous to hear myself on it. So
You did
thank
great.
you.
So thanks
Thank
again.
you so much.